All right, so let's get started implementing some server-side Node.js code. All right, so let's close all this and let's see where we are. Let's start the server and let's hit it to see where we are. Okay, so assignment, graduate, and we have index. So we have our landing page, and we have a login. We can log in with Bob, and this is all running on the client side, right? This is all AngularJS. There's no server side here, using services that are on the browser. We can navigate to the websites, and we can see the websites for different users. Again, all these are services that are hard-coded on the client side, right? So we're going to start moving all of this to the server side. All right, so let's start working on this. Let's start at the beginning, at the login, right? Being able to log in, meaning we want to be able to find a user that has a particular username and password, and once they log in, right, we want to search that particular user by ID. Actually, let's do that first. That's one a little easier. Find a particular user who we know their user ID. Okay, so let's do that. Let's refactor this so that it uses server-side technology instead of the client side that we did last week. All right, let's see. So to do that, first we're going to need a server-side piece of code, right? And so to do that, we're going to create here under a directory that is outside of the public directory. We're going to create an app.js that is our server-side application. Okay, I'm going to put it under a directory called assignment, and then under another directory called graduates, right? And I'll put my app.js under here. You're free to put it elsewhere. A good place for you to put it would be just under assignment. Okay. Or if you have your project, you could have a separate directory called project, and then all your server-side code under project. Yes? Okay. So this is my server-side code. For now, I'm just going to see if I can even load it. Console.log. So server-side app. So I'm going to load it from within my server.js. We're going to require it. Right. Go into assignment, graduates app. Okay, notice that it found app.js. See that, right? The .js is it's optional, right? It understands that it's a .js, right? So if we do that and we restart the server, notice that it says server-side app. Okay, so yeah, so we're loading that JavaScript, right? So next, what we're going to do is we're going to need to create several services that can deal with the request coming for the user, right? We want to be able to retrieve a user by its ID, okay? And we're going to do that inside of a service, right? So we're going to load that service from app.js. App.js is going to be our entry point, right? It's going to be responsible for loading everything else. Okay, one of the things that it's going to load is a file that doesn't exist yet. Require. It's going to load a file from services, and it's going to require user.service.server.js, okay, which doesn't exist just yet. Right? Notice if I hover over it, I can't click on it. I can't go in. So let's create that for now. Let's see, directory services. We're going to put all the services here. Next week, we're going to add several other directories under here, right? So we're going to group all the services under here. Then everything that has to do with data modeling and accessing the database, we're going to put it in a separate directory called models, right? But just for this week, we're focusing on the communication part between the client side and the server side. Okay. All right. So let's create services here. I'm going to say this is going to be user.service.server.js. Okay. And in here, we need to be able to listen for requests coming from the client. Okay. So, for instance, we might want to be able to retrieve data from here, right? And I can show you very easy how we can do it. If we go back to the public directory and go back to assignment and graduate and the view and the services, if we go to the user service, notice that we have the data for all the users here. Right? We like to be able to access it from here. from the server side. Yes? We can easily do that using app.get. You can say app.get. App is the instance of Express, right? And Express allows you to create HTTP listeners, right? Listen for incoming HTTP requests, right? So get allows you to listen for specifically for get methods, right? From the client, and then listen for a particular URL, right? So something like give me all users, okay? And then we can put a function here that can execute that event handler, right? So we're listening for this HTTP URL coming in to request, right? And then we can execute this function, right? So basically, what this allows you to do is create what are called web services or web service endpoints, right? That allow you to bind URLs on the server to executable code, okay? And that's very, very powerful, right? Being able to invoke behaviors or execute behaviors by just pointing to a particular URL, right? Up to this point, accessing a particular URL, we've been accessing just static content, right? CSS files, right? HTML files, JavaScript files that are, from the server's point of view, they're static, right? When they're downloaded and interpreted by the browser, they become dynamic, right? And they generate dynamic content, right? But from the server's point of view, these are all static content. Here, we have the capability of generating dynamic content, right? We can run logic, right? We can do some calculation and then respond with whatever we want, okay? In this particular case, we can respond, right? We can send back that list of users, right? That's very, very powerful, right? Being able to expose data, right, to an endpoint, to an HTTP endpoint. But we don't have an instance of app. Right? We don't have an instance of app. And the assignment suggests that, that since we have an instance of the app.js here on the server, that you pass it in as an argument, right, into the, pass it in as an argument like this. Okay? But I have a better solution. What I did is that, notice that I am not loading the native Express. See that? Right? This loads the Express from here in the node modules. Loads this Express somewhere here. This one. Right? Instead, I am loading my own little Express. Right? And what I did is I created my own little Express. It's at the root. Right? It's at the root. And what it does is that it creates the instance of Express. Right? It's the same thing that its server does. Right? Server would have created an instance of Express. And then here's the creation of the Express. It binds the instance, right, of the library to the app, right, and then it exports it, right, as a variable so that I can use it anywhere by requiring this module. If I require this module, what I'll get is this instance app. See that? It is the Express instance. There it is. See that? It's the instance Express. Got it? Make sense? Sometimes I will also need the Express library itself, right? Very unlikely, but if I need it, I have bound it to as a property of the app, right? Of the app instance. Yes, if I need it, right? I won't need it for a while, right? Maybe next week we'll need it, but nevertheless, I just wanted to point out that this was more convenient. I no longer need to pass it as an argument from anywhere that I need, like from my service here, from my user service, right? I can just require. I can say var app require. I just need to go up to where my Express library is. No, that's not it. One up. No, that's not it. Up one. There it is. Now I have the instance of app. Yes, without having to pass it around, and it's a pain having to pass that around. I can just ask for it. It's a singleton. Right? It's a singleton pattern. Anywhere I need it, I can just call it. Make sense? All right. Now I have access to app.js, and app is loading my service. Right? This is my entry point. My app.js is my entry point. The only thing it's doing right now is just loading my services. Right? Next week, we'll also load models, we'll load a whole bunch of other things, right? For now, it's just loading my user service. And my user service, the only thing it's doing right now is exposing a URL which exposes this piece of data to anybody who hits me with this URL. Make sense? If I restart my server, right, and then I use this URL from my local host, local, and I paste that in there, it gives me the array of all the users. Make sense? And this is actually available anywhere on the world, right? Anybody who knows my IP address, okay, and hits me at that URL can see this data, right? Not that I would want to, or maybe that's not my intent, okay? But certainly I can make data available. So all your APIs that you're exploring, right, use similar techniques, right, to expose their databases, right, for you to use, right? And you can see how useful this is, right, to expose data about restaurants and movies and healthcare or government or whatever, right? It's a very easy way for being able to just integrate disparate systems, right? This used to be very, very hard, right, very complex, but now has become, just a single line of code. Okay? All right. Everybody okay? Still with me? Okay. All right. So notice that I deliberately use this arbitrary URL. Okay, it's an arbitrary URL that I chose out of my whim. So should it be arbitrary? It shouldn't be arbitrary, right? It should follow a particular pattern, right? We have to organize ourselves here, right? One of the organization principles is that we are going to start all these URLs with a /API, right? That's a very, very common prepending or namespace, right, for these types of URLs, right? Yes.
I don't see the recording icon.
I'm sorry?
I don't see the recording icon.
It is recording, yeah.
Oh.
But good, thank you. Just remind me. Yeah, so this is a very common namespace that is used, and the intention is to make sure that when somebody is hitting this URL, that they be aware that they are expecting some dynamic data, right? I'm not looking for an HTML file or CSS file, because these are all GET requests coming from the browser. Yes, and usually the browser is looking for HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Here, the browser is generating a URL that is not going to generate them any static content, right? It's going to generate some data instead. Yes? So this is a very common convention to prepend URLs with the intention so that everybody who's using this URL is that they're aware that they're going to get data. But it's only a convention, right? It's not a standard. It's not, right? It's just a very common thing that is done in industry. Make sense? Another very common one is REST, /REST. Okay? I'm going to use API. All right. Also, the intention here is that, notice that up to this point, right, when we go fetch HTML, when we're here, right, and we start navigating, notice that it's coming back with HTML and JavaScript and CSS, right? And these URLs, as I navigate, notice that they all start with /something, right? And notice that they are all mapping to some static content, okay? And so to distinguish between what is going to give you data and everything else, right? We prepend everything with /API. Right, so there's no distinction. That means also that you should not, for instance, create a directory called API here. Yes? Right, because then it would be ambiguous. Right? Then this URL is ambiguous. Do you mean /API that you want me to get the index page under here? Or do you mean /API the one that retrieves me the list of users? You see the ambiguity? Okay? So the convention is that no, you're not going to do that. Right? It's you're either going to do one or another, not both. Okay? So we're going to remove that. Okay? Right? Whatever you put in public is meant for static content. right? And everything under /API is for dynamic data. All right. Okay, let's continue. I'm going to add a couple more namespaces here, only because I need to be able to distinguish that this is data for the assignment, okay, as opposed to maybe data for the project, right? So that if you're hosting both the assignment and the project on the same server, you want to be able to distinguish what data points are you getting it from. Yes, okay. But also, I'm going to add one more. I'm going to say grad or graduate. Okay, graduate. And again, this is to distinguish between the undergrad class I had this morning and the graduate that I'm having tonight. Make sense? All right. Finally, okay, the very last element of this URL should be the data type that you want to manipulate, the resource, whatever resource it is. We're treating the collection of users as a resource, right? Just like you would use a table in a database, right, that contains data, you can consider that as a resource that I like to have access. Just like a file that contains a CSV file, maybe, right, or some XML file that contains data. Well, this could be some table in a database, or an array here that is running in my RAM in my local memory. Yes, these are all resources, and it falls in the category of URL, Universal Resource Locator, right? Where it's able to anywhere in the network, I like to find a resource in its more generic sense of the word, resource, anything, right? Not just HTML files, not only CSS, right? It could be anything. Make sense? All right. So now, if I try this again, and I restart my server, and I go back here, and and then I go to API user, I still get that URL. I still get that array. Everybody okay? All right. Now notice that I am returning all the users here. See that? And that could be a legitimate use case, right? That I want to be able to retrieve all the users, right? In our application, we don't have a need for that use case, right? Because it would be inappropriate for one user to retrieve the information from all users. Yes? So we don't use that use case. But for an admin's point of view, maybe it is a legitimate use case, right? So maybe as an admin, I'd like to be able to retrieve the list of all the users. Yes? So I'm going to leave it here. I'm not going to touch this. What is more appropriate is to retrieve a user's, an individual user if I know their ID. Okay? Before I continue, notice that I have this function here embedded inside of the call here, right? I find this syntax disturbing, so I'm going to refactor this a little bit and give it a legitimate function name, right? And I'll call it find all users. Okay? I'll give it that name. So I'm going to call, I'm going to call this function find all users, and I'm going to move it from here, right? And I'm going to move it outside. Yes? Following the same kind of pattern that we're following in controllers, right? In controllers, we do something like similar, right? We have all the event handlers at the top, right, and all the implementation down the bottom, right? So same thing. Up here, we're going to have several event handlers, HTTP handlers, yes? And then down below, the actual implementation. Everybody okay? All right. So here is another endpoint that is going to explicitly ask for a particular user ID. Right? And again, this is following a structure. The organization of this URL, at least after here, is following a structure. Right? Before this is mostly organizational or administrative, right? Of how to organize it within our little world here of assignments and graduates and undergrads, right? But really, what we want to focus is here, the resources user. If you don't specify what user, it just ends with /user and no primary key, right? Then the understanding is that you're asking for all the instances of this collection of these resources, right? All of them. You want all of them. Okay? And indeed, that's what we're doing. We're retrieving all of them. We're sending back all of them. Yes? If instead it follows a unique identifier, right, it's interpreted as you want one of them, a specific one, right, that is uniquely identified by that particular primary key. Okay? And that organization or that concept is part of the convention that is captured in RESTful APIs. Right? When we say, oh, we're going to implement a RESTful API, right? It means that it follows these conventions. Okay? Slash resource means you want all the instances of that resource. Slash resource slash some primary key, it means that you want one of them. Yes? Everybody okay? All right. So this one would be called find user by ID. Also the naming convention here, right? The naming convention is that all these are finder methods. You know, just like we did when we created the API for our services on the client. Yes, we're following the same naming convention. It's find, resource name, and then by some criteria. Okay, unless you want all of them, right? Then there is no criteria. You want all of them. Okay. All right, so let's implement find user by ID. Find user by ID, and notice that the ID is embedded in the URL as a parameter. Right, it's being passed as a path parameter. It's called a path parameter because it's embedded in the path. Right, this is opposed to a query string that is embedded after the path, right, in name value pairs. Yes? Okay, and we'll look at that a little later. Okay, so find user by ID. So find user by ID, basically, it's going to retrieve the users by comparing against the ID. And I believe we have that code already implemented on the client. Right? So let's go there and fetch it. Let's see, we have find by user by ID. There it is. So let's copy that and let's move it over here. Okay. Let's see. What does this do? It's just going to iterate over all the users, and the array happens to be called the same. There it is, users. And when it finds it, notice it's going to return users u, right? But this was for the synchronous code here, right? Where we had the single-threaded JavaScript calling this function, yes, from the controller, retrieve this, and then it just came back from the method invocation, and then continued and displayed it on the template, right? Instead, this is coming through the network call, right? Through a network call, we're hitting it here, and we need to respond right back to the client with this data. So instead, we're going to not return. We're going to say response send back user sub u, okay, and then we're done, right? We're done. Let's put this in here in this if statement, and then we're going to break out of here. We're just going to return. We're done. Okay, we're not going to keep iterating. If instead we never found it, then in HTTP, how do you describe that you didn't find anything? If you go to a page and you didn't find that resource, what do you get back? A 404, right? That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to respond. We're going to send back status 404. Okay? We're going to respond from the server saying that resource you were looking for, I never found it. Okay? Make sense? All right. Okay. So if yes. Doesn't map to any physical. Doesn't map to a resource. Yes. Yeah, we can add message. We can send back some error message, right? We can add some message.
What I mean is 404 is
yeah, well, 404 is whatever that URL didn't map to a resource. I believe that's what 404 means, no? Right. The thing is that we are typically interpreting 404 as meaning that page is not there, right? But if you look for CSS and the CSS is not there, you also get a 404. or if you're looking for a JavaScript and it's not there, you also get a 404, right? So a resource that is not found, right? A 404 is a valid response. But if you want to send back some message, right? You can send that that user was not found. Okay, or you can embed that user and then with with ID and then embed here user ID. Oh, we don't have the user ID. We got to fetch the user. Where's the user ID? It's in the path, right? Now we need to retrieve that. Let's retrieve that from the path. Everything that comes from the request, everything that comes from the client is all represented in this object REQ. Okay, that is passed to us by Express. Express intercepts all communication coming from the client, right? It parses the headers, the cookies, the body. Well, not the body. It parses the URL, right? And embeds everything, and it gives it into this nice, convenient REQ object. Okay, so we can parse out the user ID from the request params, and the user ID is user ID. Okay, everybody still with me? All right. All right. So if we restart and we go back so this is still working, right? We get all the users. Or if I ask for 1, 2, 3, I get Alice, right? Or 2, 3, 4, I get Bob. Or 3, 4, 5, I get Charlie, right? Or right, if I ask for something that's not there, I get it not found. Okay, a 404 from the server. Everybody okay? Okay. All right. So now that we have those two things, oops. I go on headers can be. Oh, okay. No, never mind. We'll look at that a little later. All right, so now we're ready on the server side. The server side is ready, right? It can retrieve, it can send you back all the users, or it can send you a particular user if you know their ID, right? So our profile page, right? This profile page that retrieves Bob, right? We could instead of having it retrieve the user from the hard-coded service, client service, we can actually rewrite it so that it fetches it from the server instead. Right, so let's focus on that, right? So let's do that. Let's go. So where does that happen? That happens on the client. This right here is a function that is retrieving the user by ID, right? So what we want to do is that instead of iterating over this array, right, we want to send that request to the server, and the server respond with that user. Okay? So let's do that. Let's comment that out. What we're going to do is we want to invoke that URL. What's the URL? The URL is, according to this is the URL. The pattern is the following. Let me copy that. Right? And if you go here, this is the URL that we want to invoke. Okay? Which is what we've been playing around with, right? We've been playing around with this URL. Right, this is the correct URL, right? This right here. Yes? All right, so we're going to build it here, right? Basically, we have the user ID, so we're going to do concatenate this, right? Okay, we have the URL that we want to retrieve. Now, to be able to invoke that GET request programmatically, notice that we were doing it manually here, right? What we want to do is be able to do it programmatically, from within our code. To do that, we're going to use a service specifically for this called the HTTP service. This is a native Angular service that allows us to interact with the outside world, right, through the network. Okay, notice that the $scope was used to interact with the DOM, right, so that the controller could interact with the DOM, so that JavaScript can manipulate the DOM, right, read, write, update the DOM. The $HTTP allows us to interact with the outside world with the network, right, using HTTP requests. Yes? All right, so let's use that. And what we want to be able to do is to generate a GET request. So as you guessed it, yes, we can generate a GET request saying .get, and then we can paste here the URL that we want to generate. Okay, makes sense? Right. So if we go back here, right, and look at the network here, okay, and we refresh, you'll notice that my profile page is no longer working, which makes sense, right? We're working on it, right? We're not yet ready, but you'll notice that one of the last things that this refresh did is generate this URL. See that? There it is. API assignment yada 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 user 234. See that? Okay. Notice that the server came back with the data. See, the server's coming back. That's what's coming back from in the body, the HTTP request response that comes from the server. Right? We just need to be able to marry this right with the controller, what the controller is expecting. Okay. Now, ideally, it would be as simple as saying this: return HTTP .get URL, right? Because that's what we were doing, right? Whatever the data we found, we were just returning it back to the controller. Unfortunately, it's not as simple. Okay. What we actually get here is not the actual data right away, and the reason is that this .get is an asynchronous call, right? Remember that this code that we're looking at now might be running on a browser, halfway across the world, right? Whereas our server that is listening for this request might be running, halfway across the other side of the world, right? And so there is a network connectivity there, right? And that necessarily is we need to consider latencies, right? Or that the server's down, or that it's never going to respond. Yes. So this thread that is running on the browser, this JavaScript thread that is running on the browser, it's a single thread, but there's only one of them on the browser. Same thing on the server. There's only one thread running on the server. So we can't risk our thread, our single thread running on the browser. We can't risk it, crashing or waiting forever for the server to come back, right? So instead, with what this .get delegates the request here, it delegates it to the browser. The browser knows how to, open up a whole bunch of HTTP connections simultaneously. The browser knows how to do this, right? But our single-threaded JavaScript doesn't, right? So what our single-thread JavaScript does is that it uses AJAX, right? It's an API that allows JavaScript to delegate this work to the browser. It says, hey, browser, you know how to download a whole bunch of images and WAV files and all these resources simultaneously. You do it, right? You go handle this request, right? I'm gonna go keep doing a whole bunch of other things, right? Animating things and changing things and coloring, blah blah blah, whatever, right? While the browser is fetching the data from the server, right? Eventually, the server will respond, yes, and the browser will say, hey, finally the server responded, right? So we need a mechanism for the browser to notify the single-threaded JavaScript that says, hey, I got your data, I got your response here from the server. What do you want to do with it? Yes? Okay? So that's what we're going to handle now, right? We're going to leave the return. We'll leave the return, but what's returning here is not the data. Instead, what is being returned here is an API that will allow, right, whoever's interested in this data, right, to register a callback, right, to register saying, hey, go do this, and when you're done, notify me by calling this function. Call this function when you're done, right? So and notify me when you're done, and then you can pass me the data, right? So I don't have to wait, right? Make sense? All right. So let's go back to the controller, right? This is being generated from the controller. So that controller is the profile controller, I believe. So let's see, views, user, controllers, profile controller. There it is. Right. So here's where the call is made, right? Find user by ID. See that? Okay. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, we're not getting a user object. What we get instead. So let me copy that. Let me comment that out. What we get is a promise. A promise that at some point in the future, hopefully very shortly, right, I will notify you back. Right? I'll get back to you. I promise. Right? I'll get back to you with the data in a few seconds, right, or milliseconds, right? And that promise object has provides an API to be able to register ourselves, right? Where we can provide a function. We can provide a function that at some point, right, when the browser is done fetching our data, we'll call this function and pass us the raw response from the server. Make sense? Everybody okay? Right? So let's look at that promise. Let's do a console log promise. Response. Right? So if I refresh this and I go to the console, notice that indeed we were able to print the raw response that is coming from the server. And the raw response tells me that here are the headers, right? In the communication there are headers, right? Back and forth, cookies and stuff like that. Some configuration stuff. Some status, it was successful, it's 200, right? But the actual data is under here. See that? .data. And there it is. That's our user, Bob, right? For user ID 234. That's how we logged in, 234. Right? If I go 345, oops, sorry. Okay, notice that it prints a different object. See that? And 345, I forget, that's Charlie. See that? Right, so we are retrieving the data, and it's coming back, and we're just printing it out on the console. But we could do something better. Instead of putting it on the console, what we could do is update our module, model.user, to be the response.data. See that? Now, if I do that again, notice that indeed I have Charlie back in the template. See that? But this data is no longer from the local web service client, right? It's from the web service running on the server instead. Everybody okay? Right? And I have all of them. I have one. There it is. There's Alice. There's Bob. There's Charlie. And there's Januzi. Okay? All being retrieved from the server. Everybody okay? All right. Okay, so let's clean up this code a little bit now that you understand it. So we don't typically need the promise variable. Okay? So typically we don't store it locally. Right? There's no need to store it locally. Instead, right, we can merge these two calls into one, like that. Like that. Right? Here's the user service calling the finder, which retrieves an object that has a then function. Yes? Which we are then putting a function there that's going to be a callback function. Yes? Everybody okay? Right? Now, again, this function for me that's very hard to read. So instead, I'm going to give it a name. I'll call it, I'm going to rip it out of here. Right? I'm going to create an actual function. I'll call it render user. Right? And then I put here render user. Everybody good? Everybody still with me? Okay, and let's refresh. Let's see if that works. That still works. 345, 234. Okay, everything works. Okay. Let's do a little more cleanup. Notice that it's an inconvenience for the controller to have to unwrap the data. Right? This is the reason we have even a response here is because of the idiosyncrasies of the HTTP request, right? Of the HTTP communication, right? It should not be the controller's concern, right? That there is this layer of communication, right? So the controller should be completely unaware that you're getting this even from from a database or a server. It should not be the responsibility of the server, right? So we're going to clean this up a little bit. Ideally, here we would get what? An actual user object, right? That would be cleaner, wouldn't it? Right, so to do that, what we're going to do is that instead of, we're going to move the responsibility of unwrapping the data, we're going to put it in the service, right? As close as possible to the actual HTTP connection, right? It's because the service does know that we're using HTTP, right? So it should be its concern to deal with everything HTTP. Yes, it should not the concern of HTTP should not leave the service. Make sense? So we're gonna do the unwrapping. We're gonna do it on the website on the client service. Yes. Instead of doing the .then here, right? That is going to give me the response. Instead of doing that here in the controller, I'm gonna do it here. I'm gonna do the .then here. Yes, which gives me the response. There it is. Right, that's the response. And here's the user. Yes? And that's what I want to return, the user. Okay? That makes sense? Now what I get here is the actual user. Because we unwrapped it on the service. Right? So now this code looks much cleaner. Right? I'm asking for a user by ID. I get back a user. Right? And I am unaware that there is this response.data or any status information or whatever. Make sense? That's low-level stuff that the controller should not be concerned. Yes? Yes, exactly. They're nested. They're two nested promises. So first you have the promise that comes back from the HTTP GET, and then this user is wrapped in another promise. Yep. Very good. Or we can clean it up and just say, return response.data. Everybody okay? So we can safely now remove this from the client. Yes. Yeah, the 4.4. Let's do that. Okay. So the then function, the promise provides you two arguments. The first argument is the function that handles the successful outcome, right? The second, you can provide another function here that handles the error case, right? You can handle it here, or you can handle it here, right? You can say user error or something, right? And then user error can then receive an error. This is the error that comes from the server. Okay. So for instance, we might do something such as let's see, what can we say? We can say model.error user not found. Okay. And then in the templates, where's the templates? The profile templates. Right. We can display that error. Where? Let's see. Username, first name, yada, 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 form. Is this a profile? Yeah, this is our profile, right? Here we can display that error, model.error. So let's see. If we type some gibberish, right, notice that it displays user not found. Yes? Right? We could style it a little bit. Maybe do some div class alert and alert info, and display the error as an info. Oops, misspelled it. Alert. Okay, there it is. User not found. Okay, or maybe put it in here. User not found. Or if we have an actual user, it shows that it's empty. So it's kind of dumb displaying that blue thing when there's no error. So we could say, don't show this, only show this, ng show, only if, indeed, the expression is truthy. Right? There's something that's not empty, it's not null, it's not undefined, it's not zero, right? So yeah, so it doesn't show until you give it a dummy, then it says user not found. Everybody okay? That makes sense? All right, so there it is. So we have the very first of our services endpoints implemented on the server and the client. We've been able to refactor it to use it. Okay. Now we're going to do some of the other services as well.